The title of my message tonight is The Spirit of a Conqueror. Say, I am a conqueror. Say, I am a conqueror. Glory to God. Well, he possessed a 5-day supply of food, a Bible, the Pilgrim's Progress, and a small axe for protection and a blanket. With these, Lexon Kayara set out on a journey of a lifetime. He was going to walk from his tribal village in Nyasaland to Cairo, where he would board a ship and go to America. He wanted to get a college education. It was October 1958 when Lexon was 16 or 17. His mom and dad were illiterate and they didn't really know how old he was. They gave him his blessing, even though they didn't know where America was. And they said, go on your way if you want to pursue an education. To Lexon, with the spirit of a conqueror, this was a journey that was derived from a dream. It fueled his determination. He wanted to get an education. He wanted to be like his hero, Abraham Lincoln, who had risen from poverty to become the American president. To realize his goal, he wanted to serve mankind and make a difference in the world, but he felt that he needed to get a first-rate education. And in those days, he thought the only place he could get a first-rate education was in America. And so, but forget that Lexon didn't have a penny to his name. Forget that he didn't even have any money to get on the ship. Forget that he had no idea what college he was going to go to. And forget that he didn't even know if he was going to be accepted. Forget all that, because Lexon forget that. Forget that Cairo was 3,000 miles away, and in between there were hundreds of tribes that spoke more than 50 different languages, none that Lexon knew of. But forget all that, because Lexon did. He had the spirit of a conqueror. He put everything out of his mind except for the dream of getting to the land which would help shape his destiny. Now, as a young boy, he was not always so determined. Sometimes he used his poverty as an excuse for not doing his best at school. He said, I'm just a poor child. What can I do? But like many of his friends in the village, it was easy for him to believe that studying was just a waste of time. But then books were provided by missionaries, and he discovered Abraham Lincoln. His story inspired him so much that he realized that the first step to his road, to his destiny, was to get an education. And that's when he got the idea that he was going to walk to Cairo. After full 5 days of trekking across the African terrain, Lexon had only covered 25 miles. He was already out of food and water, and he had no money. To travel the distance of another 2,975 additional miles seemed impossible. Yet to turn back was to give up, to resign himself to a life of poverty and ignorance. No, with a conquering spirit, he said, I will not stop until I reach America, or I will try dying, or I will die trying. Sometimes he walked with strangers, but most of the time he walked alone. He entered every village cautiously because he didn't know their language. He didn't know if they were going to be hostile, if they would greet him, if they would love on him. But in each village he found shelter and work. Many nights he slept alone under the stars. He ate wild berries and fruit, and eventually became so thin and weak he got a fever. He fell gravely ill. But some kind strangers took him in and offered him a place to rest. And while he was resting, he was so discouraged and weary that he even considered turning back. Perhaps he thought it was better to go home than to continue the seemingly foolish journey and risk his life. However, he got to reread his books. He renewed his faith. He got his conquering spirit back. He was determined to reach his goal, so he continued on. On January the 19th, 1960, 15 months after his journey, he had crossed nearly 1,000 miles to Kampala, the capital of Uganda. He was now growing stronger in body and was wiser in the ways of survival, and he remained in Kampala for 6 months. He worked at odd jobs, but when he ever had a spare moment, he was off to the library because he wanted to read. He loved to read. He wanted to educate himself. It was in the library that he found a directory of American colleges. One college stood out. It was called Skagit, the Valley College in Mount Vernon in Washington. So he wrote immediately to the dean of the college, and he explained the situation and wondered if he could perhaps have a full scholarship. The dean was so impressed with Lexon's determination and having a spirit of a conqueror that not only did he grant him admission to the college, but he gave him a full scholarship. They would pay for his board and his room. Another piece of Lexon's dream had fallen into place, yet there were still more obstacles to come that blocked his path. First of all, he needed a passport. He needed a visa. And of course, he didn't even know when he was born, so he wrote right away to the missionaries that helped him when he was a little boy. And they helped him get a passport and a visa. Even though he still lacked money for the visa, he had a conquering spirit. He was undeterred. Lexon continued his journey to Cairo, believing somehow the money would come. He had faith. He was so confident that money would come that he spent his last bit of savings on a pair of shoes, because he said, when I walk into the American college, I don't want to walk in barefoot. I want to walk in with a pair of shoes. Months passed, and the word of his courageous journey had begun to spread across the waters. And by the time he reached Khartoum, he was penniless, he was exhausted. But the story of Lexon had spanned the ocean between the African continent and Mount Vernon in Washington, United States. The students of the college had heard about him, how he was trying to get there to get an education. So they gathered around, and between them and the citizens of Mount Vernon and Washington, they gathered $650 to cover his fare to go to America. When he learned of their generosity, he fell to his knees, exhausted, full of joy and gratitude. In December 1960, more than 2 years after his journey began, he arrived at the college, carrying his book about Abraham Lincoln, and he proudly walked into the towering entrance, the institution, with his shoes on his feet. But once he graduated, he didn't stop. He continued his academic journey and became a professor of political science at the Cambridge University in England, and he became a well-known, respected author. Like his hero, Abraham Lincoln, Lexon rose from his humble beginnings with the spirit of a conqueror. He made a difference in the world and became a magnificent beacon of light which remains as a guide for others to see. He says, I learned I was not the victim of my circumstances. He said, but I became a master of them. He said people in his village became a victim of their circumstances because they succumbed to their circumstances. But something was inside of them, rose up, that he was not going to be a victim of his circumstances, but he was going to master his circumstances.
Thank you for watching Dr. Bev's YouTube channel. We will continue to offer dynamic and uplifting highlights from Dr. Bev's messages. Please take the time to like and share the videos. And most importantly, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Keep watching the Dr. Beverly Wolmarans YouTube channel.